you see it? Man, all right. It was really funny because I was at the club the other night, and it just hit that point where it's like, if they play KLF or the Shaman now, it will go crazy. But of course they didn't. But that's okay. I think we should do this. I'm feeling Saturday-ly. Is that the term? This is Art of Rock.
Completely.
And we're all feeling it. Welcome. Sorry, Evan, I should have warned you. But welcome. I'd like to acknowledge the Tongva people as the traditional landowners of Los Angeles, and that's where I am right now. Hooray for Hollywood. This is brought to you by... this is the Art of Rock. Every Saturday we're here. You have to put up with the glitchy goddamn computer because that's just my life, ending 1 second at a time. Follow it on Twitch. Twitch is probably better because we raid straight to MTV TV after we do these things, and Twitch is better. This is brought to you by ANGELSPIT'S Patreon. Hey, if you've got $3 a month and you want to help me out, and you probably get a free copy of everything ANGELSPIT ever does, and the demo versions of ANGELSPIT, there it is. Plus, maybe you can help me afford to get a new computer or buy software to stop this thing from crunching because it's just killing me. ANGELSPIT'S new album is called The Bastard Gods, and it's on BANDCAMP right now, and the box set is going out this week. I swear to God. Oh, wow. Another thing I want to talk about today is suppliers running late, even though they say, oh no man, we're going to be on time, it's going to be fine, and they don't. It drives me insane. And if you want to be driven insane in a good way, listen to the Industrial Incisions playlist. It's a whole bunch of like awesome, amazing industrial classics mixed with a whole bunch of new industrial bands that you need to know about. Several of them are here. And it's actually Resi. It's funny that your track is old classic industrial music, and it's also new industrial music as well. So kudos to you, sir. And if you want more music non-stop from the bleeding edge, and if you want to see what MTV should have been, watch MTV TV. There it is. Follow it on Twitch, and when we're done here, we're going to raid over to MTV TV. If you're in a band, send them your stuff. And if you do Twitch casts or whatever they're called these days, raid to MTV TV afterwards. Take your audience with you. And remember that if you're in a band, your audience is waiting for you there. There is a new audience that are going to hear your music on MTV TV. If you are in a and if you're looking for a new band, your new favorite band is waiting for you. Because man, I've heard some incredible bloody tracks on MTV TV, and it's fucking booyah. And on the subject of Patreon, which we weren't, MTV also has a Patreon. You should back that, because keeping a 24-hour record thing, video, booga-da-boog going ain't cheap. So back their Patreon as well. This is Art of Rock, and I bid thee welcome. I sound like the mouth of Saruman when I say that. Sauron, sorry. Maybe I'm the mouth of rock, I don't know. I want to talk about something very curious. So one of my friends has just released a compilation album. And it's a compilation of bands that are local to his area. And his area is actually Hungary. So there are a whole bunch of Hungarian industrial bands. And I used to be in a collective in Australia called Crash Frequency, and we'd do the same thing where we'd send out compilations. And it was a really fantastic way of getting local music out. And another really great thing that it was doing is it was also like if a band wanted a gig, you'd send out the compilation CD, and to local promoters, and local promoters could hear what the other band sounded like, and maybe they could book those bands too. That was great. 20 years ago. But my question now is that relevant anymore? What I will say about this compilation is when I heard it, I definitely heard a sound. Like a distinctive sound, which I would if somebody said, what does Hungarian industrial music sound like? I'd say it sounds like this. It was really good. So I'm going to throw the floor open. I want to know what your thoughts are. Is this still relevant? And this conversation is going to go in some really interesting places. Who wants to talk about this? Resi, hit me.
I'm a little bit conflicted about the idea of place being the limiter, in that although I had some very strong ties and relationships in Boston as when my band was coming up, and incredible relationships with other artists and promoters and DJs, I never felt as though there was a intrinsic cohesion among those sounds of any sort, and I don't know what real good it did. I started out around the same time when rec music, industrial, and alt goth Usenet groups were another sort of way to draw a circle around a scene, and that was a lot more. Well, I mean, obviously it's worldwide, for one, and some of the compilation CDs that formed around subgroups of that seem to be a little bit stronger and become classics, but it's tough. Like, as I said, I'm conflicted. I don't have a one side or the other on this yet, but it does bring feelings.
Yeah.
There are scenes, there are localities that do have a sonic cohesion or a political cohesion or a necessary social movement, assembly, and I think that can be really strong. But I kind of missed out on joining in on that. I don't think I had the right mentality, so missing it. But I felt much more pull from these genre-bound international circles of making CD compilations. So similar but different.
Thanks, man. Ivan, I know you wanted to talk about it. Ivan, hey, how you doing?
There we go. I think it has a place yet. I don't know if it's entirely shaped like a CD or like vinyl, or a cassette tape. Because we live now in a world where most of people's interactions with music is via streaming. And so, like playlisting as a stand-in for like comp albums seems like a completely valid thing to do. Also, it costs you nothing to do it. I mean, it's about as easy gets. At the same time, like, if you can get that pressed, then hell yeah, do that. That's of course assuming that you can, then move those copies. They gotta sell because now they've been made. They gotta pay their own rent. But like back in the 90s, comps were, like everybody had a couple of them in their collection. Like it was very easy to find people that had the Wax Trax, box set, or how many comps did Cleopatra put out? It's just an open question there because I don't know if there's an answer.
Yeah, Dancing Ferret, etc. Go on.
Yeah, and those were really good at. Those were really well built comps. So, like, I think being a well-made comp with that's the songs that are on it and the groups that are on it, when that's really well selected and really representative of an idea, then of course, like the Hungarian one. Hungary is the entire country is the size of what, Connecticut. So like it's a small place, and so finding a bunch of bands that have a hyper similar background and therefore kind of veering towards the same sound, it actually like I'm not going to use the word easy because that would underplay what's going on, but like you're going to find it. and you're going to be able to put that together, and it's going to have, and having a good cohesive sound to the comp, where like, yes, these bands go together, you know, makes the comp easier for people to listen to because there's less jarring going on. And but like, yeah, you know, like, kind of gives the comp gives a bunch of bands the ability to kind of float all boats. And so, like, yeah, there's still a place for it, and but I really think, like, playlisting is probably the place to start. You know, it gives you a chance to try out comp ideas, and then from that playlist, you know, make a comp that gets sold or distributed, and you know, by the time you get there, it's, you know, really well put together. So, you know, yes, I would go so far as to say yes. I go doing the, like, is it bi-monthly Ableton meetups here in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's got no shortage of kind of pan electronic music makers doing lots of different genres and styles, and fill in the blank. You know, it's a lot of stuff happening here, and you know, I keep thinking to myself, what would be handy is to should really, you know, talk to the Ableton group, and like, everybody just submit a song for a, you know, southeastern Wisconsin electronic music charcuterie board, and
That's a hell of an acronym, but go on.
Put that out on Spotify, and you know, see if we can get people to listen, because, you know, like, there's a whole lot of stuff that is worth listening to. It's good, like, you know, and there's a lot of good music happening in that one little place. So, you know, let's float all the boats.
Thank you. And welcome, Rob. Rob, who says, walk us through how you produced the last album, Carl. Thank you, man, I will. I want to talk about this a bit more. Actually, Rob, this is something that you might really get into, because it's asking the question about compilations and are they still relevant? And you know, again, what I'll say is, you know, when I heard this Hungarian thing, I just thought, I'm going to hear a whole bunch of EDM and a whole bunch of agrotech, and it wasn't. It was something, there was something about it that was, it sounded Hungarian. But anyway, yeah, this is a really interesting question. This is really interesting. And, like, it's coming back again, if I can shoot my mouth off. It's coming back to the thing about a collective. And collectives are great. So, I've always, like, thought that a collective is kind of like a club or whatever, that there's 10 people involved. And 8 of them are along for the ride. 2 of them are doing all the work, but 1 person is really pulling everyone's weight. And unfortunately, that 1 person is the person who's going to get pissed off and go, fuck this, and then walk away from the whole thing, and it collapses and everyone's jaded. Because such and such was a bastard. But the fact of the matter is, everybody wasn't contributing. See how I just hijacked that? I think collectives are really important, and I think they're needed. And I think that, you know, we already have something here called MTV TV. And if you go to MTV TV, which I really hope these Hungarian crew do, and say, okay, let's do something that is focused on this release, then that's really exciting. You know, it's funny, I think that, because when I originally was talking to Damage in Hungary, I just said, look, it's not relevant anymore, but after hearing it and thinking about it, I think it's very relevant. And I actually think it's more relevant than it's ever been, because local gigs are becoming a thing again. Playing an industrial gig in a dive bar is becoming a thing. And it's more than a thing now than it was a thing 5-10 years ago. Because, you know, our fucking scene has really come back with vengeance. And I mean, man, it has. and there are so many young people in this scene. There are so many young bands being formed, and we've got a lot of grouchy old bastards who, yeah, fucking A. Let's hear it for the grouchy old bastards. And that these grouchy old bastards are full of knowledge and are full of experience. And we need to be cross-utilizing these things. And I'm actually starting to want to do this thing. If you're in LA, you're warned, where we meet up at my place and we're going to talk about modular synths and bitch about the realities of being in a band. And I want it to be predominantly young people to go, here's a modular synth, and what you can do with this modular synth, you can also do on a free piece of software you don't have to start buying dope for. But buy dope for it, because dope is fucking awesome. But you don't need to start pouring money into this. That's what we really need. And what's fascinating is also, I think we're at a point, we've never really been here before, where there has been this charged influx with, the old school. I mean, sure, kind of in the 90s, but, in the 90s it wasn't really... People, the old school didn't really have the handle on the didn't really have the handle on the fucking technology, although the technology they had a handle on was fantastic. That ironically we're getting back into, but I'm really digressing here. So I think that and Ivan says Milwaukee Synth Meetup, and Rezzy just put his hand up to save me because I'm prattling. But what I will say is that if you're in your area, think about doing a compilation. And people still buy CDs. I don't know why, but they buy CDs, or put it on BANDCAMP or something. Make it a free download on BANDCAMP or something. Gee, I don't know. And have a thing where everybody is selling this or giving this URL to the BANDCAMP /Spotify /whatever. And it could be a Spotify playlist. It could be a YouTube playlist. It could be an Amazon playlist. Whatever you want. An Apple Music playlist. Give it away. And the thing about these gigs is that is an opportunity to give shit away. If I had my time again, what I would have done is, instead of printing 1,000 Crash Frequency CDs, and we couldn't get rid of them because we were charging like $15 each, we should have printed 2,000. Then we should have given them out to all the members and said, sell these at your shows for $3 each, at the cost to get rid of them. Just sell them for $3 each, the printing price, the amount of money that all of them went into it, and get these in people's hands. That's what I should have fucking said. And if I ever do this again, I will do that again. And I shut up now, and I yield the floor to Razzie.
I just had a small thought. When you mentioned the thing about the last kind of wave being in the 90s, and that resonated in... One of the differences was there was that like sort of mythical gap between label signed musicians and Usenet level musicians, and they didn't really mingle that much. I mean, there may have been a couple of appearances of bigger names joining in the discussion, but by and large there was a much sort of 60s through 70s bound star system of elevating people into a sort of rarefied space that they didn't deign to talk to the new musicians. So, Carl, what you're talking about doing in like a spirit of inclusion and of, I don't know if I call it mentorship, but there is some element of that, since, let's face it, you're talking about olds and new people with knowledge and beginners' hunger to learn. I think that's gone. That distinction is much different now. I mean, I see artists quickly becoming too busy to do some of that stuff, sure, when they're touring or making albums. But I don't see the same... certain stars have to communicate through the media, through magazines, through writers, through articles, and the other people get to communicate on the internet, whereas obviously everybody's sort of communicating with fans and each other in the same media right now. So that's a powerful difference, and I hope it fosters the kind of resurgence in the scene that you're talking about. Like, that's a big part of why there are new people who are excited and hopefully, bolstering a scene of independently produced, marketed, sold, created, conceived, published, really good quality, exciting new music. And I'm trying so hard to tie this back into what that means for a compilation, but I'm like not quite there, since, Ivan's really sold it. Carl, your thoughts are on it, but I'm not seeing like where that rises to being the right implementation of pulling bands together. Maybe there is more, but Carl, please go on.
Okay, I just put a link to, I believe that's the Milwaukee Synth Meet, Ivan, that you shared. I just put that into the chat. So this is really interesting that what you said is so true, that when you got signed in the 90s, it was like getting your feet out of the quagmire. It was like you had been delivered from the slums. It's like, we've made it. And obviously, as time has gone on, we've learned that you haven't made it. You've just taken one step further. Now with debt, down the preposterous road of your fantastic musical career. It's really interesting that when I was young and starting out, there was a real mentorship thing going on, partly maybe because I was at university, and the lecturers were rock stars, and rock stars would come in and talk to us, and we would learn and talk to them. But also, maybe it may have been an Australian thing too, like with Crash Frequency, with Primary Darkwave. I was mingling and talking with bands who were signed to Cleopatra. My apologies to everyone signed to Cleopatra. Didn't turn out the way you were hoping now, did it? Oh, I have to remember to edit that part out. They were signed to Wax Trax. They were signed to Metropolis. They were signed to a whole bunch of different acts. And we could talk. Everybody was talking. Everybody was still struggling with gigs. Everybody was still struggling with expanding their audience, etc. I'm such a bastard. And what was great is that as, things moved along and developed, they were, I shouldn't be that cruel to Cleopatra, I apologize. It's a hard time for all fucking labels. Like, come on, it really is. So I apologize, Cleopatra, that was not okay. I should have included every fucking label. And that, my own included. So those labels at that time could come and, those bands could come and say, okay, the trick is this is what you have to do. And there was an Australian band called, like, fucking Snog was on, he was in his own beautifully cynical way, Thruster Pants was really, a voice of reason and wisdom to a lot of us. But I remember the best piece of advice I had ever got was from Chris from Icon. And Icon is still Australia's premier darkwave, goth band. And Chris once said, people always bitch about how record labels rip them off and use them. And he said, the trick is you have to use the label. You have to use the label. Because there's so much more than just money you can get out of a label. There's wisdom, there's experience, there are other bands, there are connections. All you have to do is be the squeaky wheel and demand the oil. And that was really excellent advice. And that was the sort of shit advice that nobody had ever given me before. It was fucking great. But yeah, I think that maybe redefining what the collaborative nature is now, because maybe I am coming into this with a sort of I'm from the 90s and this is what we used to do and it's not working anymore, so everything's fucked kind of mentality, which is kind of stupid because it's a different ball game now. And having the humility to try and figure out what that ball game is, what young bands want, what young audiences want, etc. But I will say it is difficult that there's a lot of noise. And, one of the rare places there is not noise is at a gig where you were there to focus on the music. Razzie, your hand went up briefly and I want to hear what you have to say.
I was just trying to brainstorm a little, and you touched on it, of the alternatives and what other collaborative circles are drawn. For my experience. It's been a lot of one-to-one, like directly collaborating with other artists with their skills and mine over the past, say, 10, 15 years. And remixes, obviously, the trading remixes community, it's not a community, it's everyone. The trading remixes act has been that sort of, you know, first collaboration, but also the featuring and, you know, instruments on, vocal on, couple of bars or verses in somebody else's piece, to the point that the DSPs even have fields for that now, so you can explicitly do your royalty splits. Is, I guess, the legal cause, but socially and publicly, it's to really highlight the shared space between the two artists and whatever their Venn diagram of fans are. So that bringing together happens in other places, and I'm thinking, obviously, labels. I'm still considering Lonely as an Eyesore the compilation that we're talking about, even though it has nothing to do with it. The user groups that we're talking about, whether it be the type of software that we use, like Ivan mentioned, or YouTube channels, Twitch streams and stuff. There's a whole lot of producer communities that coalesce around different people's commentary channels and stuff. There's obviously sort of pools that happen with degrees of separation on like Instagram or other social media, where your comment sphere sort of does that same thing in making, it's not really a compilation, but it's a group, an aesthetic or an ethic that people share. I mean, I'm citing this particular Twitch channel that we're talking on right now, and this YouTube channel and this Zoom meeting, as one of the most powerful and new ways of doing that. And I mean, I'm here for it, certainly. I love showing up for this. I think it's, if not the high point of the definition of what we're talking about, it certainly is an example of it. Like the modern idea of a compilation is getting into semi-public spaces for moderated discourse.
Thank you. That means a lot. Diana, did you want to say something? I would love to hear from you.
I don't speak up that much, but with MTV TV, that's created a community, and sometimes we get things that aren't quite goth industrial, but they fit amongst, as I curate a set, and we end up with fans for that band. And I think it's just grown that much. So sometimes we do end up with, if you want to say, a compilation, like we had the bands from Mexico, and it was an entire show with just highlighting bands from Mexico. But we have this worldwide community now, and I don't want to call it compilations, but sometimes you have niche things but as a whole, it's grown the community, to see the community as worldwide, not just from one spot particular. However, sometimes we do highlight certain places because that's who's sent us all the music for that month or whatever. So eventually, yeah, we'll probably have an MTV TV compilation. But I enjoyed bringing the community together and not just niche places.
I have so many thoughts on that MTV TV compilation. Oh my god, I have so many thoughts on doing a Kickstarter for you guys. I have so many thoughts, but not now. Thank you. And this is, that's why MTV TV is super important to us, because it comes with an audience. Because the whole point about these things, well, perhaps the main point, one of many points, and maybe the main point, is I need to get my music to more people. Sure, I want to improve my chops, sure, I want to be around other musicians, sure, but I have to get my stuff to more people. And MTV TV already has that, and it's there. And I'm just going to give 1 second so that we can put that in the chat, that if you're not following MTV TV, you need to. And if you don't have your music submitted to MTV TV, you need to. Yes. I've got so many thoughts. So, yeah. We're not going to start because I've got thoughts. I've got so many thoughts about MTV TV. I mean, like, you know, maybe that's going to be an off-camera thing, but it would be huge. A big Kickstarter, and I've got ideas. Okay, so I wanted to talk about how you get your music to, you know, other places, to other people. That's I think that's the big one. That's the big trick. We could. I want to. Is it what I want? Is it what you want? Yes, ANGELSPIT'S music. Yet another crazy DJ. It is what I want. I don't think I understood the question, but it's what I want. Oh yeah, MTV, because they use the promo for This Is What You Want. Yes, it is what I want. Great track. Anyway, so the question is, how do you get your shit to other people? How do you utilize a collective to help them get their music to you and you get your music to them? And we also have the Industrial Incisions playlist. But Ivan, I see your hand. I want to hear from you.
All right. I think like playlisting in general and compilations for sure. I think that they're probably becoming more valuable even in ways that especially, you know, folks from the 90s maybe we don't, you know, entirely recognize all the time, because it's a curation thing, and, you know, curated experiences are becoming very popular. You know, having somebody else curate stuff for you that's a thing, and curation is becoming a term that you spend too much time on YouTube, you're going to hear it too much. But like at the same time, like it's kind of valuable, and I think MTV TV is a great example of curating a music, you know, watching experience, and, you know, the Angel Split, the playlist on Spotify. Its name is suddenly escaping me.
Industrial Decisions, which I just put into the chat.
There, yeah. And it is an extremely valuable experience, because that is really well curated. Like this really represents what this show, what we're about. And you know, we don't have to worry about whether or not there are videos made for it, so it makes it even easier. So I would say, I don't know what I would say. Yeah, I think you know, good curation is high value. It, you know, it makes a difference. I run the Industrial Incisions playlist when I'm driving, you know, super frequently, because it's a good playlist, and, you know, stuff pops up, and, you know, heard plenty of things that I otherwise would have never heard. So I'm super happy with it.
Awesome. Razzie, I want to hear your thoughts.
I'm just a terrible community member in that I can't listen to music for enough hours of the day, enough minutes of the day even, to be a fully participating member in these things. Joking aside, you, Carl, mentioned the idea of how to get these collaborations going, and certainly listening to a lot of music helps. When I'm able to dedicate more time to discovery and listening to playlists and VJs and DJs, I definitely find myself making more memorable relationships with other musicians, not just, you know, the playlist curators and DJs themselves, but all of the above. And so, I mean, the short answer is you just slide into those DMs and ask and offer. You know, there's a quick, decisive, I like this about your work moment that can happen. There's a, I have this to offer, I think we have something in common moment that can happen. But some of the much more long-term and fruitful collaborative and just relationship building things have been based around something other than what are we going to do together. There's been some other commonality they can build, kind of a natural friendship, on camaraderie anyway. Not that I have anything in particular in mind, but it's like from pen pals to Twitter threads to threads to Instagram comments. There's a long history of just finding not everyday things. You don't need to say hi and good morning to them because they're not your besties, but you have just like kind of an arc of world building, I guess, between you and another artist or another person, and that can often lead to got your back, when there's something interesting that comes up, got something to offer you when I have a thing. Over decades, like lifetime kind of level things. Like I think those have been some of the most amazing fruits of how to get a relationship going, not just for collaborations and music sharing.
Okay, awesome. I have an observation I was just thinking about, is that unless my finger isn't on the pulse very good, which is a very big possibility, but here in the great city of LA, I'm noticing there's not as many young bands starting up as there used to be. That my recollection of, and I shouldn't compare it to Sydney, because Sydney's awesome. My recollection of Sydney is that there were hundreds of bands. And this is LA. And maybe I just need to look a bit farther. Maybe I need to look more to try and hunt down these other bands. But, I think that internet misuse is stopping people from making music because it's depleting the energy out of people per day. That when you get to a certain hour of the day when you should be turning it off, you're just death scrolling when you could be making music. Or doing something more constructive. I had a bit of a political rant just then. So, and maybe that's another thing that I'm trying to encourage as well, is for young artists or artists in general, just to be aware that there are better ways to relax than death scrolling. And better ways to ruin your life. For example, start a band. If you want to really ruin your life, if you want to throw it all away, start a band. That's all I got. I've got a lot more, but I just feel it. I've talked enough. Does anybody else want to throw in? Or we could talk about something else or something. Okay. That looks like we possibly want to talk about something else. Rob's question. Okay, cool. Okay, so thank you, Rob. So the question from Rob was, walk us through how you produced your last album. I had a big talk to a friend about this. Just the other night, actually. So what I did differently on this album was... normally what I do is create how do you achieve the nostalgic of pop compilations of the 80s, 90s, like out of the blue of our genre. So I'm going to ask the first one. So the thing that I did differently on the album is I started with samples. And I started with samples specifically because I was inspired by Too Dark Park, Twitch, as in Ministry's Twitch, and a few other really classic industrial albums. That the thing about when you start with a sample and you distort it, you end up with a musical idea that is not conventional music. I was brought up on gamelan music, which isn't tuned the same way Western music is tuned. So when you bang metal and you distort it, there's a different set of notes that it creates. And if you sit that over a drone, something different happens. It creates something different. And that's where the album, that's where the ideas came from. They came from ideas that were not classically musical. They suggested lyrics, they suggested beats, etc. And from that it grew. And it was very fucked up and fantastic. But it's interesting that how do we achieve... I want to jump to Rob's next question. How do we achieve the nostalgia of the pop compilations of the 80s, like 82, Out of the Blue, for our genre, or 1980, Up in Lights? Rezzy's got his hand up. Go, Rezzy.
I think there's a little bit of a logical fallacy of thinking that you can put the nostalgia in at the beginning rather than form it
20 years later.
Through decades. 20 years later, but maybe that's part of the joke, and it went over my head. But also, it's a numbers thing. Like, there's a bit of another, like, we're painting a target where we already know that there's something that had happened, a movement that formed our thoughts while we were listening to it. So it already changed us by experiencing it and listening to it and knowing it and becoming infatuated and loving it. And when I name check Lonely as an Eyesore, it's the same vibe that I'm getting. There's like, it defined so much about my musical tastes and interests in a moment that that's part of the nostalgia and affection for the work. But on top of that, we're talking about a numbers thing where there's 1,000 compilations that were released, and okay, there's 3 that we can actually remember as being classics and nostalgia touch points. So the other answer is, we'll get all of culture and society together releasing thousands of compilations a year, and then we can select a few that actually had some greatness and changed us to think of as meaningful. I'm a little bit joking, but also a little bit like that's kind of the only answer. Maybe there is a trick and I just missed it, and that's my whole problem.
Well, here's a joke that probably only Rob's going to get, and that is, well, we had Molly Meldrum, and Australia had Molly Meldrum, and no one else had Molly Meldrum. Hence, Australia got the best music industry in the world because we had Molly Meldrum. Yeah. Anyway, and we also had Great Southern Land. But anyway, I digress. That joke was really only for Rob and any other Australians. Yeah, man, it's really interesting. Like, because, I think about the Seattle sound, and I think about how you can probably only name 3 or 4 or 5 bands that came out of the Nirvana sound, out of the Seattle sound. And it's a similar thing also with, the Northwest Industrial Coalition. You can probably only name 1 or 2 of those bands. But nevertheless, the thing existed. I don't know. I really don't know how to create that. And, while we were talking before about this, because, I live really close to Hollywood Boulevard, and there are people handing out their CDs of their hip-hop artists, and they're just handing it out. And I said to these guys once, why don't you guys... And I said, how many of these things are you going to give away? And they say about 10,000. 10,000. And I said, why don't you guys make a CD that's got 4 bands on it, and then everybody make that burn happen, and then everybody gets copies of them because they burn these freaking things. And then someone's giving them out at Long Beach, 2 people are giving them out on Hollywood Boulevard, and someone's giving them out at Santa Monica, and then maybe you pull in a band from New York and somebody's on the street giving them out on the streets of New York as well. So from that, you have just massively expanded your reach, because the ability for these people to hustle, it's just inspiring. Yeah, it was funny that I researched one of these bands and I checked out their Spotify plays, and there's nothing going on. There's like under 1,000 plays a month, and for somebody who said, "Oh yeah, man, we've given out 10,000 of these things," and it's like, okay, how do you achieve that sort of thing? Like, is it the same thing that you do at a club? Like, I used to do something where I would give out CDs at the club, and at the end of the night, you'd be picking up these CDs that were just discarded everywhere. And it's the same with Hollywood Boulevard. You go through the bins, and there's CDs in the bins. And I asked one of my friends who bought one of these CDs, what was it like? And he goes, it was awful. It was just rubbish. And it's like, yeah. They could put one CD with 4 or 5 bands on it with their best tracks on it, and it would be killer. And that wouldn't end up in the bin, in the trash. Yeah, so it's always my question is, how do you get your music to people? And yes, a compilation is a great way of doing it, but how? And the Industrial Incision playlist is a really great thing, and I want to really send a thank you to Drake from 40 Octaves Below, who is always pushing that thing. And he kicks my ass, actually, because I need to push it more. He's great. He's always pushing it. And it comes down to hard yakka or hard work, that you need to be constantly pushing this stuff, and it's really hard to do it because it's so easy to give up because you feel like you're screaming in the noise, but you got to do it. 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 You must do it, because the minute you stop, you're dead. The minute you stop swimming, you sink. So you've just got to keep doing it. And finding other bands to do that, like finding bands to sit around and talk about how good it would be, easy. Super easy. Every single band in the world just wants to sit around and talk about how good things could be. How about we do this thing? But the bands that actually do it, very, 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 very rare. And that's why people get pissed off with compilations, because it's always 1 or 2 bands pulling everyone else's weight, and then those 2 bands go, you know what, fuck those guys, let's just do our own thing. And they're not necessarily the best bands either. But yeah, man, you gotta work. You gotta keep pushing it. You gotta keep doing it. That's what I think. That's what I've got. Does anybody else want to shoot their mouth off and jump in there? Ba-boom. Anybody? Yeah, Ivan, what you got?
I do have some thoughts on, promoting the playlists. That we should, talk about when we're offline.
Sure.
Noise for our viewers. Just gonna start dumping stuff out of my head. So
okay. All right, cool. I would love to hear them. Does anybody want to talk about stuff that we can talk about right now? And Diana, just quickly before I jump to you, Resi, Diana said, we could do this with MTV TV turned into we need to do this, and I absolutely agree. And I commend you guys on your tenacity in constantly pushing. And when it comes up in my feed, I try and share it. But it's fucking impossible, I know. Resi, talk to me, baby. What you got?
Carl, you touched on the idea of local shows,
Yeah.
which is the greater topic of playing live, which feeds into the occasional greater endeavor of touring that you've mentioned and have some, I find, really interesting thoughts on, very practical. And I guess I'm looking for a bit of hope on that front on a personal level. There's this distinction between acts that are just going out and touring and it's just what they do, and then whatever, there was never a plague and it's fine if it doesn't make any money and it's a promotional thing and they're young and it doesn't matter if it basically ages them and kills them and is a major sacrifice. But then there's also like the practical level where, Carl, again, you talk about things needing to earn their keep on the topic, I think it was synthesizers at the time. But I would imagine you have some perhaps thoughts on the future of the possibility of shows becoming a thing, or how to approach maybe this idea of, like you said, local dive bar gigs and stuff like that. Like what's on the horizon? What's the future? What's going to happen in a year, in 5 years, if things don't change much on the on those fronts that I mentioned? Do you have a path forward?
Oh my
Is there
God.
something going on there?
Oh my God. Funny, because I actually went to see a good friend's band. Two friends had their band play on Saturday, and they were good, but the sound was so bad it ruined it. By the end of it, the sound got better, but then they destroyed the headlining band, got ruined as well by sound. This is what I think you need to do. You need a show that is as small and simple as possible. And it might be just you. Just you and a laptop, or maybe a projector or something. Gee, I don't know. But just you. Because just you is the only person that just you can actually count on. Just you is the only person that just you can rely on to get to the rehearsal on time, actually turn up on time, not play drunk, etc., etc., etc. If you find somebody who can help you, wow, oh my God, what's that like? The thing to remember is that the plague is real. It's going to be real, and it's going to be real for a long time. And, you know, sure, if you're doing one-off gigs and you get COVID, it's not going to do much. But if you're doing a tour and you get COVID, as I've stated before, it's going to ruin the tour. You're going to be down for 5-10 days. Because everybody who didn't get it on the first round, 3 or 4 or 5 days later, they're going to test positive fucking then. And by the way, you're not playing. And also a lot of bars and things that are setting up for shows, specifically in our genre, and hey, most genres, because rock and roll it's struggling, but it's getting its feet back. You know, it's finding its feet again, are small venues. And you can't fit a drummer on stage. Like, Jesus Christ, don't get a fucking drummer. Like, I feel like I'm just screaming at the air. Like, don't you fucking understand? Oh, but a drummer would be cool. They don't look at the drummer. They don't care. They want to look at you. They want to see a person on stage who is a motherfucker. That's what they want. That's what the audience wants. The drummer isn't on the poster. You are. But why do I bother saying this? Like, if I'm doing a tour, I will specify that the support bands don't have drummers. You don't have a drummer, that's it. Oh, but they're really good. I don't care. You're off. Because the amount of setup time, the amount of sound check, the amount of pull down, all of that fucking bullshit. Like, you know, back in the good old days, there was a thing that it was like 45 minutes, half an hour or something between the sets, and that's so the drummer could do their thing. They could set up and pull down a drummer. It's not like that anymore. The stages aren't big enough, and the rooms aren't designed for it, and the PAs aren't designed for it, and I just don't have the fucking energy to talk about this. And then the drummer complains that they can't hear themselves in the fucking monitor because the sound guy hasn't had an experience with the drummer, because the sound guy's a DJ who doesn't work with fucking drummers, and the drummer wasn't smart enough to have in-ear monitoring, for fuck's sake. Oh my God. Oh my God, it's giving me gas. And when I say gas, I mean gear acquisition syndrome, and I just want to buy a drum machine. So, just you. And if you know someone else, get them on the stage too for moral support, if you can trust them. And what they can do is do what most EBM bands do, and that's mime. Oh my God, did I just say that? mime or write an email to their mum or something. Hey mum, I'm on stage. There's keyboards in front of me, but I'm emailing you. Like what Kraftwerk do. Because a person doesn't have a big footprint, and when the singer looks back and they're feeling kind of like, they can get some moral support from that person or whatever it is. I think that I think that the thing about the plague is the plague was really an acid trip for so much stuff, where it just went, everything changes now. The rules are gone, everything changes, and we're going to start back at square one. And, you know, there have been some terrible things, but also one of the few good things are the rules are questioned. The rules are negated, and we're going back to scratch. That's what I think. So I hope that helps. And it's actually, this is really exciting, because I want to do shows where I just sit up with a microphone and a backing track that's on my phone or something, and I just push play. And then I jive out. Because I need to get back into... I haven't done a live show in 6 years. I haven't even done karaoke in more time than I can remember. So, yeah, I really, really want to do that. So I feel the future is exciting and it's good, and the future's yours. And now that there are no rules, we can get to redesign all those rules again from scratch. And, you know, I've mentioned on a really short story, everything in Australia went through this revolution because a band called Cobra Killer came. And they were signed to Atari Teenage Riot's label Digital Hardcore. And they were two girls from two different bands who were really fucking heavy. And Cobra Killer was basically one of those Roland remake 909s. It wasn't a 909, but it was something like that, and a distortion unit. And 6 bottles of wine. And these two chicks carved it up. And they were so free and so inspiring that everyone went, holy fuck, I want to do that. They didn't have a drummer. And when they came back to Australia a second time, because they actually toured with Peaches, Peaches went, this band's incredible, I'm taking them all over the world. Thanks, Peaches. Yet another amazing thing Peaches did. This band destroyed. Cobra Killer absolutely destroyed. And they inspired dozens and dozens of bands to do the same thing, to say, fuck it, we're going to just use a laptop. And ANGELSPIT was one of them. And when they came back, they didn't have a drummer. They were the same thing, and they were just being themselves. And that is two girls having fun, really fucking good friends, just going at it live. And it was a celebration and a fucking party. So maybe I have a really good feeling about the future, and it's a wave, and I want to surf that wave. Which reminds me of something that Wenham said from the IT crowd, but it's not appropriate. Anyway, yeah, go Renham. Does anybody want to mention anything else and say anything crazy right now? Because I feel this is kind of like, I'm borderline saying, let's write to MTV TV. Unless somebody wants to throw in something amazing. Or we could write to MTV TV. Maybe we should do that. We are going to go, and we're going to go hang out on MTV TV because it is the place of amazingness. And as I mentioned, every Saturday we are here for Art of Rock. Please join us. This is brought to you by ANGELSPIT'S Patreon. If you want to help me out, $3 a month. That's it. And you keep this craziness going. ANGELSPIT'S new album is The Bastard Gods. It's on BANDCAMP now, and it's bloody ballsin'. But right now, and Diana, get that magic finger ready. Oh, before we do, remember, if you want new music, get onto the Industrial Incisions playlist. It's on Spotify. Like it and follow it. And if there's bands on there you like, follow them too. But right now, we are going to go to MTV TV. So we're going to raid on over because it's Trey Bomb. See you next Saturday. Bye. Bye. bye, 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 bye.